Tonight's question is simple to ask and brutal to answer. Is truth discovered or created? This debate is really about what a society must protect first when the costs are real. Behind the title sit power, principle, and the price of choosing the wrong standard. One answer leans toward truth through questioning, virtue, and examined reason. The other leans toward truth through value creation, self-overcoming, and suspicion of herd morality. A cross-era philosophical duel over truth, virtue, morality, creation, decadence, and what remains after inherited meaning loses its authority. Listen carefully for the standard each side treats as non-negotiable. Watch which costs each thinker admits and which costs each tries to hide. This is not just about history. It is about how these logics still shape modern judgment. Neither side gets to win on tone alone. Each has to prove what its answer preserves. You are not here for slogans. You are here to weigh consequences, coherence, and courage. Before the arguments begin, let's meet the minds behind the collision. Welcome to When Great Minds Collide. Tonight's matchup is Socrates versus Nietzsche. Socrates tends to reason from truth through questioning, virtue, and examined reason. That means Socrates will likely define the problem through a very particular moral lens. Nietzsche tends to reason from truth through value creation, self-overcoming, and suspicion of herd morality. That means Nietzsche will measure success by a very different standard. Each side must answer the title question directly, not just attack the other speaker. Examples matter here, but standards matter more. Because standards decide what counts as success. Listen for where each side places the burden of proof, and what each side treats as unavoidable. The sharpest moments usually come when a clean principle meets a dirty reality. At the end, tell us who made the stronger case and whose hidden costs bothered you most. Socrates, you have the floor.
I start from first principles, truth through questioning, virtue and examined reason.
Socrates defines the standard so tightly that almost any other value starts looking secondary.
If your answer ignores that standard, it will sound clever while producing the wrong world.
The argument treats one kind of failure as decisive, while undercounting every other kind.
My opponent wants the benefits of order without paying the price of clarity about what matters most.
I will show that the supposed realism of this answer is narrower than it first appears.
I am not arguing for comfort. I am arguing for a framework that survives contact with reality.
A durable answer has to protect more than the single instinct Socrates keeps centering.
The question is not whether my standard has costs. Every serious standard has costs.
Once we widen the frame, the opening case looks less complete than advertised.
The real question is whether the alternative hides even larger costs behind noble language.
That opening sounds strong, but it hides what people would be forced to live under. My answer begins elsewhere. Truth through value creation, self-overcoming, and suspicion of herd morality.
Nietzsche wants the moral upside of this answer without fully owning its institutional cost.
If you define the problem the way my opponent does, you lock in the conclusion before the debate starts.
The alternative case depends on assumptions that become fragile under pressure.
A serious society needs more than one hard instinct dressed up as necessity.
I will argue that a society built on that standard would eventually borrow from mine anyway.
My opponent's standard may sound disciplined, but discipline alone does not make a framework just or wise.
When the stakes rise, nice language cannot substitute for a harder account of what holds.
I accept that every answer carries risk, but risk is not a reason to choose a narrower moral horizon.
That is why the opening we just heard is less stable than it first appears.
The better framework is the one that preserves what is human while still facing what is hard.
That framing sounds humane, but it leaves crucial realities underexplained. My first principle is that the title question must be judged by what it protects at the deepest level.
A principle that cannot absorb complexity becomes a weapon against the very people it claims to protect.
If we start with the wrong principle, every later compromise becomes a rationalization.
Socrates presents clarity as a virtue, even when that clarity strips away needed nuance.
Nietzsche is asking you to trust outcomes, while remaining vague about the anchor beneath them.
The better starting point is the one that admits plural goods instead of flattening them.
The foundation matters because institutions take the shape of the values they are built to serve.
So I reject the false choice that only one hard instinct can organize public life.
So the burden is on my opponent to explain why my central standard should be displaced.
A better principle is one that survives not only theory, but real human variety.
Without that answer, the alternative remains rhetorically attractive, but structurally thin.
My opponent keeps calling this a question of first principles. But first principles still need humane application. History is never just a scoreboard. It is an argument about interpretation, causation, and what we decide to count.
Institutions fail in patterned ways, and those patterns are easier to see from my side of the question.
Socrates treats difficult outcomes as proof of my side's weakness, while treating failures on that side as unfortunate necessities.
My opponent cites exceptions, but exceptions do not erase the larger shape of the record.
That is not neutral reasoning. It is selective emphasis disguised as inevitability.
What matters is not one anecdote, but the recurring consequence of choosing the wrong priority.
If we read the record with fuller attention, we find that my standard protects goods the other side undervalues.
When outcomes are measured seriously, my framework explains more with fewer evasions.
The evidence gets clearer when we ask, who paid the price for supposedly necessary victories?
So the historical burden still falls harder on the side trying to replace my standard.
So history does not rescue my opponent. It complicates the story in my favor.
History gives my side more than abstract elegance. It gives concrete warnings about what happens when this standard is ignored. Now press the moral edge case, and the contrast sharpens.
Socrates calls hidden costs a flaw in my framework, while normalizing openly brutal costs in that one.
My standard at least admits the cost it asks society to bear.
Honesty about sacrifice matters, but so does refusing to glorify sacrifice when better arrangements exist.
Nietzsche wants the comfort of a softer answer, while depending on harder structures in the background.
My answer asks for complexity, because human dignity rarely survives one-value politics.
That is a moral problem, because hidden coercion is still coercion, just cosmetically improved.
The real edge case is the person crushed by an order that calls itself necessary.
A serious ethic names its sacrifices, instead of disguising them as universal goodwill.
On that ground, my framework remains more human without becoming naive.
On the hardest cases, my answer remains painful but honest.
The moral pressure test hurts your side too, and pretending otherwise does not make it cleaner. I will answer your question if you answer mine. Who decides when your necessity becomes abuse?
Where exactly does your framework draw a non-negotiable line?
Your line sounds sharp, but sharp lines are exactly what cut living societies in ugly ways.
If everything is contextual, what stops the strongest faction from defining context for everyone else?
When your framework fails, it fails with authority, not merely with confusion.
You say my answer is too hard. I am asking what keeps yours from becoming too soft to hold.
You keep equating flexibility with weakness because rigidity flatters your style of argument.
Name the cost your side is willing to pay instead of only listing the costs of mine.
Name the people your answer marginalizes first, not just the order it claims to secure.
If your principle needs my principle in the background, then your case is incomplete.
If your principle cannot survive scrutiny without appealing to fear, that tells us something important.
Let me ask directly. What happens when your preferred standard collides with the first real crisis? In closing, I ask you to judge this question by what endures when appearances fall away. My case has never been that my answer is painless. It is that it is truer to the real demands of the problem. Nietzsche offers important cautions, but not a stronger governing standard. When you strip away rhetoric, the title question still turns in my direction. If you care about durability, seriousness, and clear responsibility, my side has the stronger case. That is why I believe the future belongs to the standard I defended tonight.
My closing point is simple. A framework is not wise merely because it sounds stern or inevitable. I have argued for a fuller account of what human beings, institutions, and societies actually require. Socrates identifies real dangers, but responds to them with a narrower horizon than the problem deserves. The better answer is the one that protects what is human while still facing what is hard. If you listened for hidden costs as carefully as declared virtues, my side should trouble you less. That is why I believe the stronger answer to this question stands with me.
So we return to the question, is truth discovered or created? Socrates made the strongest case when the debate turned toward truth through questioning, virtue, and examined reason. Nietzsche looked strongest when the debate turned toward truth through value creation, self-overcoming, and suspicion of herd morality. What remains unresolved is the trade-off each answer asks you to accept. That is why this debate still matters, far beyond the lives of these two thinkers. Modern institutions still inherit versions of both instincts, often without admitting it. Tell us in the comments who won and which standard you found harder to escape. Steelman the side you disagree with before you post. That is where the best discussion begins. If this debate changed how you hear the question, say so. Like the video if you want more collisions built around real standards instead of empty slogans. Subscribe if you want the next matchup before the argument starts without you. Until next time, keep your mind sharp and your certainty humble.